Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm back here with another My Team Career Mode Season 3 GP weekend, and it is of course the Spanish Grand Prix. This should be quite an interesting Grand Prix. It's provided plenty of action in the past, but before we head on to this race weekend, click off the video now if you haven't already watched the last video, which was of course at Imola, and we're going to have a look at the results, and it was a really frustrating race for us. We were taken out of the race on lap number 8 thanks to a mechanical failure, leaving us with just 25 points on the board. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc managed to take the win last time out. He has 44 points after P2 and a fastest lap in Bahrain, and then P1 in Imola. He's got a very comfortable lead over us, and that is going to be quite difficult for us to reel in a gap of 19 points. Especially with how strong Charles is looking this season. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez managed to round out the podium for Red Bull in a really strong weekend for them. Max Verstappen taking P2. He's moved ahead of us by 5 points. Not too worried about that because, of course, we have a much better car over the Red Bull, so we should be able to reel him back in. Perez with a solid P3 to move him up just behind the sister car of the AlphaTauri, driven by Pierre Gasly. And then Valtteri Bottas improved on his P10 at Bahrain to take P4 last time out. He has 19 points, still quite a way off the Red Bull of Verstappen, 6 points behind Sergio Perez. Meanwhile, his teammate Lewis Hamilton finished P10 after getting a broken front wing on the first lap, pitted, and only recovered to take a single point. Another man who had a broken front wing was George Russell, slightly later in the race than Lewis Hamilton. He then had to pit, came out behind Hamilton, but of course made his way back up the field to get P8 and the fastest lap. What a start to the season for him. The McLarens looked really strong, P5 for Norris and P6 for Daniel Ricciardo. Now then, we are going to move on to having a look at the R&D. Of course, I was saying, really strong weekend last time for McLaren. They're looking fantastic. Catching up to Ferrari. Ferrari going to look to fight back. We're going to go for an ultimate exhaust upgrade in the engine power, and upgrade that I really want to get in. In terms of durability, we're going to have a look at maybe... No, we can't get that in, of course. Department capacity is reached. So we got that exhaust upgrade, and that's going to give us a bit more power in the power unit, which sounds a bit of a weird thing to say. Having a look at what we can go for. Major gearbox reliability. If we rush that, we can get it in before the Spanish Grand Prix, but not really sure. There's MGUK, MGUH we could maybe go for. I think we'll go with the MGUH. Fancy the MGUH. We really do want to improve the reliability. We don't want another instance like we had at Imola. We don't want to be losing focus as much as I want him to gain a claim. We can't afford him to lose focus. We don't need to gain focus at the moment. He's right up there. But we can't afford him to lose the focus for the team. We want to try and take that Constructors this season. Moving along a little bit, we've got some more R&D in the bank at the moment. In terms of my teammate, though, 97 focus, 99 rated still. He's looking really strong. We're going to get to what we're doing with the power unit. Of course, it was the turbocharger that blew up last time. We're going to get to that when we get to the sort of pre-race quali, free practice screen kind of thing. That graphic there where it shows you all that. We're going to go over what the plan is with what penalties we're going to be taking, whether we are or not. But of course, driver claim or driver focus. Charles being 97 with driver focus, I think that upping the driver focus isn't going to make much of a difference at all. It's only going to go to 99. So we're going to go for driver acclaim plus 2,000. That's going to help him out. And of course, go back into the team's driver acclaim. Continuing along a little bit into May, the race coming up soon. We're going to get some more R&D points, 825 there. And we have got a very healthy advantage in the R&D. Ferrari at the top of that group. Doubt it'll be for too long. Mercedes and Red Bull will be fighting back, but with that upgrade in and drag reduction, we're now going to have a look at an upgrade, potentially, before France. I think we might invest in the drag reduction side of things before France. We either want to... Oh, dear, this isn't great. We either lose experience or lose a claim because there was a gym accident, and yeah, we don't want to look terrible, but I think we're going to have to, because of course we need those R&D points from my teammate by him having that experience. And yes, a bit more luck heading into this weekend, and all three of those upgrades are in. And we are still a little short on the ultimate drag reduction upgrade. We can have a look at that. We don't need to invest in the chassis for a little while. And then, of course, we're going to have maybe a look at the rotors upgrade. I'm liking the look of that. We might have a look at that heading a bit further into the season. Certainly not really wanting to go for that reliability upgrade at the moment. But, of course, qualifying the race are going to be wet here in dry. Here in Spain, very low chance of them being wet. Getting a little bit mixed up there. In terms of what we're doing with the engine, we have got a 100% blown turbocharger. As a result, if we want to not take any grid penalties on the turbocharger, we'd have to do 4 races each on those components. I don't think that's really going to work. CE, we're going to have to take grid penalties. That's already 41% wear after 1 Grand Prix. It needs to go 5 for us not to take any grid penalties. My conclusion is that we are going to stack grid penalties once again here. We've not done quali at the last 2 races, of course, Season 1, Season 2, and we're going to do it once again in Season 3. We are taking grid penalties for all of these. Then we are going to switch back to the component we were using at Imola, apart from for the turbocharger, because that would just not be a very good idea. Let's just put in a blown turbocharger at the start of the race. That's not really going to work, but we are going to take grid penalties for everything. That's electronics, turbocharger, energy store, MGUH, MGUK, and ICE. We're then going to use the old parts, and then we're going to go on to these new parts later in the season. The idea being that we shouldn't have to take any more grid penalties by doing so. So we're going to go out in FP1 to register it, that we've taken the grid penalties for it for this weekend. We're then going to swap back to the old components, and I'm going to do a bit of free practice in FP2. And that is what we have done. We've got all those components sorted, so now we hopefully won't have to take any grid penalties for anything but the CE until later in the season. We don't know. Could be some sort of disaster with reliability and mechanical failures. But as you can see, we have switched to all the components that we were using in Imola, apart from for the turbocharger. And after FP2, which we did, we have got some more R&D, and we're going to go for that drag reduction upgrade, which you'll love to see. And then, of course, we're going to hopefully be able to have a look at that rotors once we've got some more R&D in before France. Maybe trying to get that upgrade, and we don't want to really go with the minor brakes upgrade. We're so far ahead in the chassis that we can just leave it, really, at the moment. We'll try and get those 2 in maybe by the end of the season to have a maxed out chassis, but it's not really important. We leave Verstappen 8-7 in the rivalry after a bit of a disaster last time out. But in terms of the R&D graph, we have extended our lead once again to the chasing pack. Not by much, but we are keeping our lead firmly intact. Then Red Bull have shot back up. They're equal with Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren just behind. Those 4 are very, very close, and I really do believe that it's going to come down to the drivers this weekend. Extremely close between them. It should come down to the on-track performances. Meanwhile, the gap to the midfield of Alpine and Aston Martin is continuing to increase little by little. Those 2 side by side. It'll come down to the driver performances. Then behind, it's Williams, AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo. Williams have really shot up, and then now with AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo, who are starting to drop away a little bit from Alpine and Aston Martin. Those guys are very close together. It'll be interesting to see if AlphaTauri can still compete with Alpine and Aston Martin, even though they're still really far behind. But now, into quali. Well, we are, of course, not competing in Q1 because it's pointless, because we're going to be starting from the back of the grid anyway. But of course, end of Q1, Charles Leclerc is the quickest man on track. 1 minute 14.215, showing a little taster of what I'm sure he can do in Q2 and Q3 for our team. A fantastic dominant lap from him there. Then the Red Bulls, Verstappen and Perez, very, very close. Verstappen ahead of his teammate. That's what we're starting to see a bit more this season. Perez had the advantage last season. Verstappen seems to have the advantage at Red Bull this season. The gap between those two, not very large. And it's the Ferraris of Russell and Carlos Sainz. George Russell just behind Checo Perez by 2 thousandths, and a fantastic lap from him there. We know Russell's really settling in well into that Ferrari, and he's closely followed by Carlos at his home race. The Ferrari duo looking really strong here in Q1. They are, of course, P4 and then P5. Carlos Sainz being behind his teammate. Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton P6 and P7 at the start of quali. Mercedes looking a little weaker than Red Bull this weekend. Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas, he's looking pretty decent. Hamilton a little bit behind him though, maybe struggling a tad compared to his teammate in pace. That is something we've seen quite a few times in this career mode. And of course, with the same engine, you've got the McLaren team, P8 and P9. Those two fairly close together, but that is the sort of biggest gap you've got in this group of Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren. McLaren struggling a little bit this weekend. Lando Norris ahead of his teammate, Daniel Ricciardo. Gasly takes P10. Fantastic work from him, with Lance Stroll P13 for AlphaTauri. They're sandwiching the Alpines, which are much faster cars. So fantastic work from Pierre Gasly to take that P10. Hopefully, he'll be fighting for Q3 later on in qualifying. But of course, his best lap, 1:16.026. Very strong. Ahead of both Alpines. Ocon, of course, is just behind him. His fellow countryman in the Alpine. He's ahead of teammate Fernando Alonso. Just separated by 4 thousandths there, but Alonso looking a little bit weaker to start Q1, whether that's the home pressure or a very much improving Esteban Ocon, who's really getting comfortable in that Alpine after a pretty dismal season in Season 2, but certainly improving, and he'll be happy with P10. Better Q1 performance than Imola. He's followed by his teammate Alonso, then Lance Stroll P13 ahead of Yuki Tsunoda P14. Great to see Yuki through in that Alfa Romeo for the first time this season. He's struggled for pace, but now starting to get a bit more comfortable with the car and really starting to find some decent pace. So the Japanese driver up to P14. Great to see him out of Q1 and starting to go places with that Alfa Romeo, which you'll love to see. He's been really a bit off the pace of where the Alfa Romeo actually potentially is, but now getting some decent results. Matsushita, P15 for Aston Martin through to Q2 once again. What a qualifying machine he is proving to be. Another fantastic performance from him, continuing what is a great debut season ahead of his teammate, Robert Schwartzman, also for Aston Martin. A really decent lap from Robert. Doesn't really have the pace of his teammate, though, in quali, and is half a tenth behind. Then knocked out in Q1, Mick Schumacher for Haas. He'll be a little bit frustrated with that, will Mick. But so close to Q2, missed out by 4 thousandths, but he should really, really be happy with that. I actually forgot to say in the R&D, Haas is still at the bottom. You get so used to it that it's just a common thing. But really outdriving that car to get that P17 in front of both Williams and his teammate, Antoine Houjeau. But P18 is the Williams of Giovinazzi. He'll be a bit frustrated to be beaten by the Haas, but starting to gain a bit more confidence, I suppose, in that Williams, and still comfortably ahead of his teammate. Not really getting the performances, though, that Yuki Tsunoda is, considering they're both off to new teams this season in that sort of a sense. But P18 for the Italian ahead of Juan Houjeau. P19 for an Alfa Romeo, not finding the pace that his teammate managed to get 5 tenths behind there for the Chinese driver. He'll be a little bit disappointed. He's not managing to find the pace like Matsushita is, compared that they're both on their debut season, but the gaps between them actually aren't that large at all when you inspect it. So getting closer to the rest, not exactly though where I'd want to qualify P19. I think the Alfa Romeo is probably a little bit stronger than that. Then Nicholas Latifi, P20 for Williams. No surprise to see him back there behind his teammate. Not really finding the pace out of the two Williams drivers, but does also lose out to Wang Yuzhou, who he did manage to beat, I do believe, back in Imola. And then Nikita Mazepin, P21 for Haas. No real surprises there.
The Spanish Grand Prix has been a permanent fixture on the Formula One calendar for over 30 years now, and for good reason. Do you remember Michael Schumacher's absolute dominance here in that rain-soaked Grand Prix in 1996? That day he took his first ever victory for Ferrari, and we've had many more iconic moments since. The Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya then, a high-speed 2.89-mile circuit which demands an efficient downforce package and bravery on the part of the driver, especially through the blind right of turn 9, which we might just see taken flat this weekend. And as always, a man with plenty of racing experience joins me in the commentary box. Today it's Anthony Davidson. Tell me, Ant, you're no stranger to surviving the melee of turn 1, so how do you keep out of trouble when there's so much going on around you?
Well, the throttle goes both ways, Crofty. You've got to have the discipline not to try and win the race on the first lap, so always be prepared to lift early and give those around you more space. Trying to be the last of the late breakers with half a dozen cars around you may pay off from time to time, but it's also a great way to lose your front wing.
Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, edging out Sergio Perez, who lines up P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Verstappen, Russell, Lewis Hamilton and Bottas, Norris, Ricciardo, Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly, Ocon, Stroll, Nobuharu Matsushita and Schwartzman. Sainz, they'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. Tsunoda, Mick Schumacher and Antonio Giovinazzi, Joe, Latifi, Mazepin and the owner driver. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today?
Having a look at the order then, and there are suddenly some split strategies, I've got to say. Soft versus mediums, 2-stop versus 1-stop, top 9, all on the softs, apart from George Russell, who starts on the mediums. Everyone else from there down is on the mediums, including Carlos Sainz, who's been dropped down to P15 for Ferrari with a unlucky grid penalty for him. Bit of work for him to do in the race to get back up into the points. But Charles Leclerc is the man starting on pole. No real surprises there. My teammate has fantastic pace in the car. The car has fantastic pace. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out there and takes the win, because really, we have a very, very dominant car, I've got to say. Then, he's ahead of both of the Red Bulls. Perez ahead of Verstappen. Interesting to see there. They've got George Russell just behind. But Perez ahead of Verstappen, that's sort of a flip of what we've seen so far this season. Very evenly matched, though, between the two. Expect them to tussle throughout the race. Certainly wouldn't be surprised if we see that. Then, of course, P4, George Russell. Fantastic quality result for him. And he's starting on the mediums. So, of course, because he's starting on the mediums, he's going to potentially be able to take home a podium. In fact, I think it's quite likely that he'll take home a podium here today, because he's going to be on a much quicker strategy than the Red Bulls in front, the Mercedes behind, and the McLarens behind. I don't think he's going to be able to finish ahead of my teammate. He's got so much pace, does my teammate Charles, but very promising race for him. And then the Mercs, Hamilton ahead of Bottas. Those two very evenly matched. Often Hamilton slightly better in race situations. Bottas, though, with more pace. Those two should be potentially battling each other a bit today. They don't want to get caught up too much, though, by the traffic of those on the one-stop strategy after they've done their first pit stops. Then the McLarens of Norris and Ricciardo at the back of this sort of group. That's what we're starting to see a little bit with them. Norris ahead of his teammate, the Honey Badger, Danny Rick. No real surprises there. That's what we usually see with those two, but not really finding the pace out of their McLarens. And Alonso, great work from him to make it through to Q3. Also, not very good tactically, because he's starting on the soft tyres, which means he's going to probably end up losing a lot of positions, and he's probably not going to finish in the points, because Gasly, Ocon and Stroll on the mediums are going to come through. Gasly aided by, of course, Sainz having that grid penalty, starts P10 on the mediums. He could get some fantastic points in that AlphaTauri, and great to see him around the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, who is P11, and Lance Stroll P12. So the AlphaTauri drivers really doing well in some pretty slow machinery there. ahead of the Alpines. Of course, Gasly ahead of Ocon, Stroll just behind Ocon, so great to see those guys showing some decent pace in a car that isn't that great. Then the Aston Martins of Matsushita and Schwartzman, P13 and P14. Another great quality result for the rookie Matsushita, and equally so for his teammate Robert Schwartzman. Those two, though, their positions, of course, really great working quality to get them in Q2, but aided by Carlos Sainz having that grid penalty down to P15 for him on the mediums. Bit frustrating. He'll have to try and make his way up the order. I think he will on that strategy with the pace of the Ferrari into the points, but a bit of a shame. Then, of course, Yuki Tsunoda, P16, couldn't improve on P16 in Q2 when he made it there. Then Schumacher, Giovinazzi, Zhou, Latifi and Mazepin round out the grid. Having a look at the strategy, we are going to go and start on the medium tyres. The plan is then to go to the softs. If we are struggling with tyre wear, though, we can go onto the hard tyres, giving us a bit of flexibility there. And then, of course, the other strategy, an awful lot slower if you go for the two-stop. Here we go then, 5 red lights. They're out and away we go for the Spanish Grand Prix. Mazepin alongside gets a pretty poor start. It's then Latifi in front. Giovinazzi, not the best of starts initially. We've now got 3 wide between Zhou, Giovinazzi and Latifi. We're going to send it down the inside line. Meanwhile, Sainz fighting with Matsushita. We've now got 3 wide with Tsunoda. Tsunoda and Giovinazzi. We're going to move up the order. Meanwhile, Lance Stroll's teammate, Pierre Gasly, fighting with Robert Schwartzman. Schwartzman with a fantastic start, trying to make it P11 now, past the AlphaTauri. The AlphaTauri, though, going down the inside line to defend the position. Meanwhile, we are going to go down the inside line of the Aston Martin of Nobuharu Matsushita. Not the best of starts for him. We get up into P15. It's Mick Schumacher with a great start in P17. Very solid for him. Carlos Sainz on the back of Lance Stroll, who didn't get away incredibly well or incredibly badly. Great start for Robert Schwartzman, though. He's up to P12 with Lance Stroll just behind, fighting with Carlos Sainz. Sainz is going to go around the outside line, but is forced to slot back into P14. Those two, of course, fighting there at the start of this Grand Prix. It's then Esteban Ocon into the points. Great start for him. Norris splitting the McLarens already, and George Russell remains P4. Then, of course, in front of him, you've got the 2 Red Bulls. Verstappen up to P2. Meanwhile, my teammate Charles Leclerc leading the race. Fantastic start for him, but as you'd expect in this car, already 1 second ahead. Meanwhile, we are now charging onto the back of Carlos Sainz. He might get a bit close to Stroll, and he is. Maybe he's going to try to go down the inside line of Lance here. This could open the door for us. We can pick up the leftovers. And trying to go for a move for Stroll. Leaves some space around the outside line at turn 4. We're going to brave it out. Now, we're going to head down the hill. A little bit of a gap there. Bit too risky to take it, though. Sainz closes the door, stops us from going for a move, and we are forced to settle back into P15. We'll have to see if we can go for a move on Carlos next lap, or will he be able to get a move for Lance Stroll? I don't think he will. Both of them, though, will have DRS. Now, on to lap number 3, DRS enabled. We won't be able to use that down the main straight at the moment, but we will be able to use it at the other DRS, so this lap. But now, of course, maybe an opportunity. We're so much quicker than the AI in Sector 1. A bit slower, though, in Sector 2, and pretty slow in Sector 3. But now the opportunity to go for the move on Carlos Sainz. No real space for us on the outside line. We're going to have to hold back a bit, but look at that. Stroll really holding him up there, and we are going to be able to glide around the outside line, down into the hard braking zone of turn 5, I do believe, and that is the move done on Carlos. We are now up to P14.
Good job.
Lance Stroll is the next man we want to get past, and of course we want to get past him pretty quickly so we can get up to, of course, what will be Esteban Ocon and the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly. Those are the guys we need to be around for this one-stop strategy, so we need to get a bit of a move on getting past Lance Stroll, and we are going to not be able to do that for a little while because we don't have any DRS after a poor Sector 3, in my opinion. And now Carlos Sainz charging back at us. Down the inside line he goes. We do carefully-ish close the door, and he doesn't manage to come through after sticking it down the inside line at turn 1. We are now, though, going to be able to gain on Lance Stroll, and a warning for that, really. Yeah, because we gained so much time, but we're going to continue along, and we need to start pushing onto the back of Lance Stroll. Meanwhile, though, Esteban Ocon versus Pierre Gasly. Ocon, of course, got P10 off the start. Really great start for him in the Alpine. However, Pierre Gasly, his fellow countryman, wants to protest that, and he's going to try to do so down to turn 1. Gasly down the inside line. They're going to continue the battle into turn 2. Gasly braves it out around the outside, doesn't just do that. Fantastic acceleration from him, gets the move done. We're going to have a look at getting past the AlphaTauri of Lance Stroll. Of course, Gasly's teammate. Gasly up 1 place. Is Stroll going to go down 1 place? No, he isn't. We're forced to back off there. Can't really get the acceleration off the corner. Great acceleration for Lance, and he keeps that P13. Of course, I do feel Schwartzman starting to cause us to drop away from the Alpine of Ocon, and of course, now the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, who has gained that position. We are now gaining on Stroll down the straight with that DRS. We're going to have a little think about potentially going for a move into turn 3 here. That's where we've got the pace against the AI. And now, round the outside line of Lance Stroll, very close to him there, but we're going to manage just about to get the move done. Yes, we are. Before turn 4, don't even need a braking zone to get it done. Much more grip round turn 3, and that is the move done. We also, though, want to get past Lance Stroll. We've got past Lance Stroll. We also want to get past Robert Schwartzman, because now we're going to be able to go for a move, potentially down the inside line, but we do need to get past him fairly quickly as we nearly go into the back of Robert. We need to get past Robert so we can start catching back up to Ocon, and now trying to go around the outside line. Not to be able to go for that, but now he gives us plenty of space into turn 4, and we are going to be ahead, and we are ahead of the Aston Martin. P12 now, and we continue our great progress. Meanwhile, my teammate driving fantastically, P1 at the moment for him. Those softs, though, 7 laps old, and after probably what was a lengthy run out in Q2, and it's going to feel like a lengthy one for those tyres in these very warm conditions at quite a tyre-eating track. Charles is into the pits, joined by the Red Bull of Verstappen. Perez, of course, staying out at the moment. Norris staying out. Ricciardo will be in. Bottas staying out, I do believe. Hamilton will be in. Good pit stop for Verstappen. Not as quick for Charles. Still, though, a decent pit stop there. Bottas is the one who stays out. Sorry there. Hamilton's into the pits. Where's my teammate going to filter out? Is it going to be in front of Esteban Ocon? Yes, it is. He's only going to have to clear Pierre Gasly. Then Max Verstappen's going to be out behind Carlos Sainz, who has quite a big lock-up there. Lewis Hamilton exiting the pits in P8-19, in fact. And now Nikita Mazepin versus the exiting the pits, Daniel Ricciardo, and Ricciardo nearly collides with Mazepin again. That nearly happened in Bahrain, but now Ricciardo's going to want to quickly dispose of getting past Mazepin round the outside line at turn 4. Move comfortably done and won't drop too far away from Fernando Alonso. Lewis Hamilton now, P19. He's got to chase after Latifi. Having a look further up the order, my teammate versus Pierre Gasly. Gasly, of course, hasn't pitted yet. Charles certainly has. Can't get the move done, though, on this lap. But now down the main straight onto lap number 9. So there's a pitting. Charles down the outside line gets the move done before the braking zone. George currently staying out. He's on the one-stop strategy. Meanwhile, Perez is going to come out behind Matsushita, and more importantly, behind his teammate. Lando Norris is going to filter out just in front of Antonio Giovinazzi. Meanwhile, further back, it is Valtteri Bottas versus the Alfa Romeo of Guan Yu Zhou. Bottas, P16, gets ahead of Guan Yu Zhou. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz versus Lance Stroll. Sainz round the outside line of Stroll to get the move done there. P7 for him, and some absolutely fantastic racing to watch here. As we look further down the order, it is, of course, we've got Hamilton still behind Latifi. As a result, Alonso and Ricciardo have really caught up to him, but now plenty of action into turn 1. Schwartzman versus Sainz. Sainz looking for P6. Both of them on the same strategy, and now Schwartzman's going to try and brave it out round turn 3 to keep the position, but it is Sainz who goes around the outside line and gets the move done. Stroll versus Max Verstappen. Verstappen sends it down the inside line in the Red Bull. Fantastic move there. Meanwhile, his teammate Perez is going to try and run the outside line of Matsushita and gets the move done. Norris versus Tsunoda. Norris around the outside line of Yuki. And as we look a little further back, we're going to have more overtaking, as it's Ricciardo down the inside line of Alonso. Fantastic move there from the McLaren, and that is for P21. P21 now for Fernando Alonso. Ricciardo up to P20. Alonso only running ahead of Nikita Mazepin. And now plenty of action. Lance Stroll staying ahead of Sergio Perez. This lap, Yuki Tsunoda versus Valtteri Bottas. Bottas can't come through there. And now, as we are heading down the main straight, we're going to try and go for an overtake on Esteban Ocon. He's sat in P4. We are now going to get the move done before the braking zone. Pretty comfortable using DRS. And that is ourselves just behind Gasly in terms of who I need to really get past in this race. Is now Lance Stroll versus Perez. Stroll got overtaken by the Red Bull of Verstappen a few laps ago and now is behind Sergio Perez. We're seeing a lot of overtakes currently at turn 3, which I've got to say, you've got to love to see there, of course. Looking further down the order, Yuki P14 still defending from Valtteri in this one. He really does do quite a good job at holding up Valtteri Bottas. I think we've seen this once or twice before in this season, and of course last season. But now Valtteri Bottas, P15. He's going to have a little look around the outside line of Yuki Tsunoda. A better camera angle would be a bit more helpful. Yuki is going to keep the position. Fantastic defending. Meanwhile, Latifi, and then we've got Ricciardo versus Fernando Alonso. Ricciardo keeps P20 ahead of the Spaniard, and now it's Sergio Perez versus the Aston Martin of Robert Schwartzman down the inside line for the Red Bull, and now he can chase after his teammate as we look further back. Lewis Hamilton versus the Williams of Antonio Giovinazzi round the outside line into turn 1, maybe. Yes, he is going to go for that. Inside line for turn 2, and Hamilton gets the move done. He can now chase after his teammate, who is still stuck behind Tsunoda. What about a move potentially? No, he's not going to be able to go for a move into turn 4. Bit frustrating for him. Now, Daniel Ricciardo versus Nicholas Latifi. Fantastic racing here. Ricciardo up to P19. Alonso will have to quickly get past him. Now, Carlos Sainz versus the other Alpine of Esteban Ocon. He can't get the move done. Matsushita there is fighting with Lando Norris. Stays ahead of him. Bottas versus Tsunoda. Round number 3, or is it round number 4? I can't keep count now. And Yuki Tsunoda stays in front. P14 for him and more. Absolutely fantastic racing here between those two at the Spanish Grand Prix. You'll love to see it. Carlos Sainz is chasing down Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Carlos, though, being closely followed by Max Verstappen down the inside line for the Spaniard, also at his home Grand Prix. Gets the move done on Esteban Ocon. Now, Lance Stroll versus Robert Schwartzman. Stroll getting the move done on Robert Schwartzman, or is he? Schwartzman trying to come back round the inside line, but can't really contest that. Meanwhile, further back, Valtteri Bottas versus Yuki Tsunoda. Finally, Bottas getting the move done on Yuki Tsunoda, and Hamilton maybe here to pick up the leftovers. Meanwhile, Daniel Ricciardo is up ahead of Guan Yu Zhou. Yuki Tsunoda is going to also lose out to Lewis Hamilton. Wow, makes it very, very difficult for Bottas to come through, and then lets Hamilton come flying past there. But fantastic defending against Bottas for quite a while from Yuki. Alonso, though, still stuck behind Guan Yu Zhou in this GP. Back to ourselves now. We have had a few more laps of catching, and we are chasing down and going to get past Pierre Gasly before the braking zone. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz has come in for his pit stop. He's on the same strategy as ourselves, but that is ourselves up to P3. Got to monitor the gap, though, back to Max Verstappen. George Russell leads from my teammate now. Perez versus Esteban Ocon. Perez gets the move done. Bit of a follow your teammate today for Perez. Meanwhile, Matsushita versus, I think that is Schwartzman there. And we've got Schumacher behind Lewis Hamilton. Plenty of action. Zhou is under pressure, though, from Fernando Alonso. He needs to get a bit of a move on because Daniel Ricciardo has already got past the Williams of Antonio Giovinazzi. George Russell is in following his teammate who has just pitted. He'll be looking for a clean pit stop. Charles, of course, is on the 2-stop strategy. He'll be pitting again. We are not pitting. I'm happy with tyre wear. We are going to go quite a way into the race and then go onto the soft compounder tyres. Pierre Gasly has not opted to box. Meanwhile, is Schumacher gonna come into the pits this lap. That'll be an interesting one. He is into the pits this lap in that Haas. He's going to be joined by Lance Stroll, who's in Esteban Ocon. Will it be a nice stop at Alpine? Meanwhile, Robert Schwartzman, Lewis Hamilton, we've got Schumacher, we've got Ricciardo, Guan Yu Zhou continuing along. We've got Nicholas Latifi. Carlos Sainz is going to be ahead of Esteban Ocon. Then it's going to be Lance Stroll. Giovinazzi is in for Williams. Meanwhile, Matsushita goes past. Yuki Tsunoda also goes past. And it is Giovinazzi just behind. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton versus Valtteri Bottas, the battle of the teammates. And it's going to be Bottas down the inside line. This is for P9 here. Robert Schwartzman backing these two up together and creating some fantastic racing action. Love to see that. Now, of course, Max Verstappen, P4. Pierre Gasly, P3 in the sister car. He is behind me, but he's been doing really, really decently, actually, since we got the overtake, of course. He's just trundled around nicely and kept within DRS, but it is his pit stop now. We're going for the medium to soft strategy, so we won't be in for a little while. Mick Schumacher is P11 currently. He's going really well in this Grand Prix. Having a look at this, though, Pierre Gasly is in at the moment. Robert Schwartzman, is he going to come into the pit? Yes, he is. Mick Schumacher is in. Yes, do you believe us that he came in last lap? He hasn't gone in last lap. Was got a bit mixed up with the camera angles. He is into the pits with Robert Schwartzman, the duo looking for some fresh tyres. Schwartzman was in front of Mick. Let's see if a clean pit stop from the Haas group can get Mick in front. And it looks like it will not be him in front. He comes out behind. Meanwhile, Nicholas Latifi getting a nice pit stop there. So it is Lance Stroll, P14. He's already pitted. Then it's going to be Matsushita in front of his teammate. Got quite a train forming here. Tsunoda is behind Mick Schumacher. We've got Nikita Mazepin, P22 at the back. And now it's going to be Mick Schumacher versus Schwartzman on lap number 17. A lap after the pit stops for Mick Schumacher and Robert. And Mick is going to take the lead of this train. Robert struggling a little bit, and I'm beginning to wonder if he's got some sort of a mechanical issue with that Aston Martin, because he's really dropping back, and already Schumacher's starting to get away. Got to feel sorry for Robert. He's been driving fantastically, and it's really is turning into an issue. Tsunoda has already passed him, and now he's going to be under threat from Antonio Giovinazzi in the Williams. And when you're in an Aston Martin getting passed by Williams, you know you've got some issues. And now the Williams of Antonio Giovinazzi down the outside line into turn 1, inside line for turn 2. Is Robert Schwartzman going to contest it into turn 3? He is, but it's not going to be enough. And Giovinazzi is up to P18. Bad to worse for the Aston Martin. On lap number 20 out of 33, my teammate Charles Leclerc still in P1. He's just driving pretty calmly and consistently. You can see some of those back markers nearly getting overtaken, but they won't get overtaken because Charles is into the pits on lap number 20. It's going to be, I'm guessing, a set of medium tyres to take him to the end of the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is P3 ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. Will it be Verstappen into the pits or Checo? And I think it is Verstappen. Yes, Verstappen into the pits. Charles is out of his pit box already. And it should be ourselves versus him down to turn 1. And we've still got another pit stop to complete in this one. We haven't even completed our first pit stop. And that will be our first and only pit stop. And we are still behind him. George Russell into P4. He's already pitted for his mandatory pit stop. Hamilton versus Valtteri Bottas down the main straight. There's going to be no overtaking there. Was Verstappen going to filter out? He's going to filter out in front of Pierre Gasly. Then it is Carlos Sainz ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. What about Daniel Ricciardo? Is he going to be out ahead of the Alpine of Ocon? Ocon's teammate Alonso has pitted. And now it's going to be Stroll, P13. Alonso, is he going to come out in front of Matsushita? I'm not sure about this one. It's going to be pretty close into turn 1, but it is going to be Alonso in P14. His teammate Esteban Ocon did manage to get ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. Plenty of action here. Now, Robert Schwartzman losing more and more places. It's the second Williams of Nicholas Latifi. bad to worse in this Grand Prix for Robert, and he has now been overtaken by the Williams down to P21 for him, and his race pretty much over. Now, Checo Perez into the pits, clean pit stop from the Red Bull crew. Is he going to be out ahead of his teammate? That's going to be interesting. Hamilton's into the pits. Is he going to be out ahead of his teammate going an extra lap? Overcut versus the undercut at this stage in the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is going to be out ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, and it's Gasly and Carlos Sainz. They're going to have a little bit of a fight into the first sequence of corners in Sector 1. Carlos currently behind, but he could be able to go for a move in a second. Lewis Hamilton, P10 out of the pits. Ocon versus Ricciardo, and Ricciardo's going to try and cut it back nicely there into turn 1. No space to go for the move now, though, at turn 3. Can Ricciardo try it around the outside line? No. What about turn 4? Down the inside line for Daniel Rick. Is he going to get it? He's got not really much of an overlap, but decently through the corner, and that's the move done for Daniel Ricciardo up into P11, but Ocon's going to protest it really, really well there from Esteban Ocon to try and protest it, but he's not going to be able to keep that position. Valtteri Bottas has not pitted yet. He is going to be in this up. Very confusing with the pit stops and everything like that, but he is in, and we're going to see the question now of whether he is going to be in front of his teammate. Of course, Hamilton went for the undercut, Bottas for the overcut, as we do see Gasly and Sainz speeding down the straight. Lando Norris, great race for him so far, up in P8. The question is, where is Bottas going to be? As we see in front, Sainz ahead of Pierre Gasly. Great move there. Bottas versus Hamilton down into turn 1. Bottas is going to be ahead, but Hamilton speeds round the outside line. And that's quite surprising there. The overcut for Valtteri Bottas nearly managed to give him the position over his teammate. Now then, we are P2 as Charles goes quickest. 1 minute 16, 5.9, 5.79 was it? 5.97. Either way, we are still going on these tyres. We're going to be pitting about next lap. I think that's when we're going to come in. The tyre wear is not too bad, not even 50% on any of the tyres, so we're perfectly fine to go for this strategy. Thing is though, the gap to Russell we've only lost about 2 seconds to him in about 8 laps of racing, so it really is showing how the warm mediums aren't too much slower than the hards. Thing is though, are we going to be able to get back ahead of Verstappen and Perez after the pit stops? That is the question to answer. We've just, of course, lapped the Haas there, and now Pierre Gasly versus Lando Norris. Norris, of course, on fresher tyres on the two-stopper round the outside line of the Frenchman, and the McLaren driver's day is going to just keep getting better here if he can just hang it round the outside line at turn 3, which he does manage to do. P7 for Lando, fantastic work there for him, and now we can finally get rid of these mediums, because I'm pretty confident that our softs are going to be comfy to the end. George Russell now set to take a P2 in this Grand Prix. I said before the Grand Prix started that, you know what, I think he's going to get a podium. And it's certainly looking like that without any reliability issues for the Ferrari engine. Certainly don't want to jinx it though, because I think he really deserves his podium. On that strategy today, we are in, mediums are off, softs are on, and a 2.1 second stop time. Very clean from the team. Perez is through, Verstappen in front of him, and we have got quite a bit of catching to do in the Grand Prix. The focus at the start of the Grand Prix definitely on us making positions, and it's going to be on us charging down the Red Bulls at the end of the Grand Prix. 3 seconds to make up to Perez, quite a bit to do. But now, on to lap number 27. Our first lap on these tyres has been pretty dismal. We are going to need to put in some really decent laps, and starting to feel there's a good amount of grip in this tyre. Feel pretty comfortable on it now after the outlap, and we should be able to put in some decent times. Now, of course, the two Alpines fighting a little bit. Ocon versus Alonso. Alonso on fresher medium tyres than Ocon's worn hards, and they're going to go side by side between the Alpines, and it is Alonso around the outside line of his teammate to take P12 at his home Grand Prix for Fernando. Pretty close to the points, not going to be there though. Meanwhile, Mick Schumacher versus the Alfa Romeo of Yuki Tsunoda. Schumacher's going to drop down to P17. Tsunoda with the move done before the breaking point. Still though, a fantastic drive so far in this Grand Prix for Mick Schumacher. P17 in a Haas, and that Haas, tell you once again, isn't very quick. Meanwhile, in lap number 28 on to 29, the team apparently saying, Jeff apparently saying, I should be in onto the softs. Well, that's a bit ridiculous, Jeff. I mean, don't know why we go for another pit stop at the end of this Grand Prix, another stupid Jeff team strategy moment, but we are catching on Checo. We've had a really strong couple of laps, and now we're going to see if we can go around the outside line. Purple in sector 1, we're going to get close to Perez, not close enough, and we are going to have to wait until next lap. And now the opportunity, we have to get the move done this lap, unless we're not going to be able to contest P3 at the end of the Grand Prix comfortably through with DRS there. And now we have got chasing to do. We've got to chase down Max Verstappen, who's in his Red Bull, and at the moment we've got Hamilton versus Pierre Gasly. Gasly on all the tyres. Hamilton is going to come through, or is he though? Because Gasly's defending it down the inside line. He's going to try and keep the position. Hamilton comes through into P8. Bottas will want to clear Gasly pretty quickly too, and this is going to be losing a lot of time to his teammate, and that is starting to happen. Bottas can't seem to clear Pierre Gasly, and that's going to prove rather costly. Meanwhile, Daniel Ricciardo, P11 on the edge of the points. So close to points to date for him, yet seemingly so far away. And now, Valtteri Bottas versus Pierre Gasly down the inside line for Valtteri, and he should be able to get the move done. A bit of an overlap there at turn 1 allows him to go side by side at turn 2, gets the move done pretty comfortably. Gasly struggling a little bit with a car, maybe a slap of oversteer on the exit of turn 2, and meanwhile Carlos Sainz out of the Grand Prix at his home Grand Prix. It's a mechanical failure. He was running so well from outside the points, and Carlos is out of the race on lap number 31, so close. That's 2 mechanical failures in a row for him. What a shame. Meanwhile, Pierre Gasly and Daniel Ricciardo, both of them are going to finish inside the points thanks to Sainz's retirement, but it is Ricciardo up into P9. Great move from him. Wow, what a shame for Carlos. 2 mechanical failures in a row. That Ferrari engine really is not holding up at the moment. Lap 32 out of 33, and as we are about to head on to the final lap, we have done some catching on Max Verstappen, but it's now or never if we want to try and take the podium. DRS down the main straight. We're going to have a little look round the outside line to turn 1. No space there, but of course our speciality, turn 3 and turn 4, that is where we are gaining so much time on the AI. But this lap, not really getting that close to Verstappen. Our tyres starting to wear. Don't feel like the Williams that we're having to lap there is really helping us, and we're not going to be able to go for a move. The only other opportunity for an overtake now is pretty much going to be out the other DRS zone. It's very difficult to overtake there, and we have a good exit, but we're not going to get close enough to Verstappen, who's in the Red Bull, and we are going to have to sit here in P4. But now, the last chance. We're not going to be close enough, though, I don't think. DRS is open. Nowhere near close enough for what would be quite a cheeky little dive bomb there, and it's going to be P4. I think, yeah, we're not going to be able to go for a move at the end of this Grand Prix. We've made good progress. It's not to be, though. It's not going to be a podium, and that continues the streak of every time we finish on the podium, we win. We are still yet to take a P2 or a P3, but we come home from last on the grid to P4 here at the Spanish Grand Prix.
A real team effort which has paid off in spades. A great victory here at the Spanish Grand Prix. And talk to me, what do you think it was that sealed the win for them?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection. A shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
Well, what a thrilling end to an incredible Grand Prix weekend. Our top 3 finishers should be incredibly happy with what they were able to achieve out there today.
A bit of a shame there for us that we couldn't manage to get ahead of Max Verstappen on that last lap. But still, P4, 13 points in the bag. And of course, the fastest lap, giving us an extra point to add to 12 points for P4. Not to be today, but it certainly is for my teammate Charles Leclerc, who takes a win from P1 to P1 at the flag. 25 points in the end. 43 minutes of racing, and he absolutely dominated. Nearly beat us to the fastest lap. In fact, and he would have been on a much higher fuel load when he was setting that lap. Another just really, really fantastic drive from him on that two-stopper today, and absolutely dominated the race, finishing a whole 23 seconds ahead of George Russell. But what a drive it was from the Brit. An incredible P2 and a podium on that one-stop medium to hard strategy. Couldn't have executed it better, and takes 18 points, which, God, I love to see. He's had a fantastic start to the season, I've got to say, and he's really continuing that form. P3, of course, Max Verstappen, solid race on the two-stopper for him, and then some fantastic defending right at the end of the Grand Prix meant that he managed to keep that P3 and a place on the podium, which gives him 15 points and allows him to extend the lead in the championship to ourselves by another 2 points. Solid result for the Red Bull driver. And he finished ahead of ourselves. We managed to make it from P22 to P4. Shame once again, I've said it a few times, I'm going to say it again. Real shame we couldn't get Verstappen on the last lap. But we did take the fastest lap, of course. A 1 minute 15, 9.58, which means we take 13 points. Sadly, though, we are losing a lot more points to my teammate Charles Leclerc, and a few more points to Max Verstappen. 2 to be exact there, but still a good recovery from the back. Checo Perez started P2 on the grid, and you would have been hoping for something similar to that at the finish, but only 10 points for him. Still a solid 10 points, but didn't really have the pace of his teammate today, finishing about 4 seconds behind. Nonetheless, a solid drive from Checo. Maybe we'll be a bit disappointed. Would have hoped for something potentially a little bit more. Then we've got Norris, who is ahead of both Merckx and Daniel Ricciardo, and Norris P6 with a fantastic drive there. Split the Mercedes right off the start with a solid start to the Grand Prix on lap number 1, and then drove absolutely fantastically. Takes 8 points in the end, and you couldn't really fault him in that McLaren. Really solid drive on that two-stop strategy, and executed it really, really well out there today. And it's also a good start to the season for him, which he has lacked in the last few seasons, so he's certainly going to be happy with that. However, for Mercedes, a bit of another story. Only P7 and P8, Hamilton finishing ahead of his teammate. Those two really close together throughout the race. Yet, of course, Valtteri Bottas towards the end there dropped a little bit away from his teammate. He finishes P8, Hamilton above him in P7. 6 points for Hamilton, 4 for Valtteri, and a bit of a disappointing result for Mercedes. Quite a chunk behind Red Bull, and those two really struggled with traffic. So did Daniel Ricciardo, who finished P9 in the end from 8th on the grid on that two-stop strategy, taking a couple of points for him. And McLaren didn't really have the pace compared to his teammate out there today, but only 2 points out of it is not that incredible. But still, it's actually quite a bit considering the sort of form he is on so far this season. P10 is Pierre Gasly. Started there and finished there with another very solid point to add to his tally, keeping that point scoring run going, and it was a really strong result for him. Then we've got the Alpines of Alonso and Ocon. Alonso finished ahead of his teammate. Sadly, though, for him, 9 seconds away from a point at his home Grand Prix. But of course, that two-stop strategy really did not help. But overall, it was a solid drive from the Spaniard in the end there. And his teammate Esteban Ocon may have been hoping to finish ahead of Fernando, considering he was on that faster one-stop strategy. But in the end, not to be either for the Frenchman in the Alpine. But still a solid drive. Take that P12 ahead of Lance Stroll, who finished P13. First of those to be that, but of course, great to see Lance just behind Alonso and Ocon, considering how poor that AlphaTauri is compared to the Alpine. It's quite a few tenths a lap slower, so a good result from Lance. No points today, but still finishing in the top 15. Then Nobuo Matsushita might have dropped a place from his grid position, but a fantastic drive from him once again places him with a very solid P14. He should certainly be proud of that. It was a really great Grand Prix from him, and you'll love to see him continuing with these fantastic results. And also a great result for his fellow countryman Yuki Tsunoda in that Alfa Romeo, really starting to settle in at the team and also starting to settle in a bit more with the car and getting a great result there. Mick Schumacher also getting a fantastic result for Haas. We know that Haas isn't that quick, so a really great result for him to finish P16 there, especially when he started P17, making progress off a very solid qualifying result. Then Antonio Giovinazzi, P17 for Williams. A little bit disappointing for him to be beaten by a Haas. Couldn't really get into the mix with the AlphaTauris and the Alfa Romeo of Yuki well, not this season, but today, of course, in this Grand Prix. Bit of a shame for him. Still struggling to set into that Williams a little bit. Robert Schwartzman looked really, really strong at the start of the Grand Prix. I think it was P12 at one point, making fantastic progress up the field from an already great starting position of P14, but then seemed to have a massive issue while he was leading the train, dropped all the way behind all the drivers, including Latifi. Started to recover a bit after that, but it all went a bit wrong for him after some promising pace at the start of the Grand Prix. A real shame, because it could have been a decent result for him today. Juan Zhou, P19 for Alfa Romeo, another bit of a disappointing result for him, not really finding the pace that his teammate has, so nowhere really near that, and finished behind Giovinazzi in the Williams and Schumacher in the Haas. Not too much to say right home about for him. Similarly for Latifi and Mazepin. Nicholas Latifi, P20. Nikita Mazepin, P21. That's something we sort of got used to. But of course, Carlos Sainz, P22. Sadly, 2 mechanical failures in a row for him. Not finishing the race with just 3 laps to go, but in the driver's standings, it is all changing around because Charles Leclerc now has 69 points in his bank, 31 ahead of us, and that is suddenly an awful lot more than a race win with the fastest lap, so it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to claw that back. Verstappen sits between us in the Red Bull, 45 points on the board for him, 24 behind Charles, quite a way behind. We're only 7 behind him, so I'm not too worried about that because we do have the faster car at the moment. Sergio Perez, P4 for Red Bull, making his way up the order a little bit. That's probably where he wants to be, and where Red Bull want him to be. 29 points on the board at the moment, 40 behind Charles, so probably out of contention for the fight, for the title fight, if we have a little bit of a think about it, but still making good progress. So is George Russell. Fantastic start to the season for him. He's P5 on his debut season for Ferrari with 20 points. Just 1 point behind him, though, fellow Brit Lando Norris, who sits in P6. Good result for him. Then, of course, Pierre Gasly, P7 for AlphaTauri. He's got 22 points at the moment, dropping a little bit down the order. Nonetheless, though, he has had a fantastic start to the season with some fantastic points, and he's just driving incredibly well. 22, 2 behind Lando. I don't think he'll be staying there, but I think he could certainly be fighting for a top 10 at the end of the season. Then, the first of the 2 Mercs is Valtteri Bottas, and he's on 17 points. A disappointing start to the season for him. 5 behind an AlphaTauri, driven by Pierre Gasly, is pretty poor. Already 52 behind my teammate, pretty much out of any chance of being able to fight for the title this season, and a really poor way to start the season for him. Similarly, though, for Carlos Sainz, who's P9, 10 points at Bahrain, and then 2 mechanical failures in a row proves very costly. He has 10 points, like Daniel Ricciardo, who sits there in P10. Those two on the same amount of points. Lance Stroll, P11 for AlphaTauri with 8. He's had okay start to the season, really strong at Bahrain. Of course, then not really managed to get great results recently, but not too bad of a start to the season for him at all, really, considering he's in that AlphaTauri. Then Hamilton in P12 with 7 points, and Fernando Alonso in the Alpine in P13 with just 2. Those, I do believe, from Imola. Having a look at the constructors, though, we have 107 points as a team, extending our lead after losing a bit to Red Bull at Imola. We now have a 33-point lead over Red Bull. They have just 74 points on the board at the moment. Ferrari have shot up to P3, 35 points for them, with a solid result this weekend, 1 point ahead of rivals McLaren, who sit in P4. AlphaTauri have dropped down to P5. They've got 30 points, so 4 behind McLaren. That's not really their fight, though, and with Mercedes charging from behind, they'll probably be searching just to secure a very good 6th place. And talking of 6th, that's currently held by Mercedes, who have 24 points. Alpine have just 2. But of course, Charles extending his lead in the championship over us. We are starting to drift further away, and that's going to make it a lot more difficult heading into the French Grand Prix next if we want to try and catch up to him. But P4 here today from 22nd on the grid. If you guys have enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, but I'll catch you next time when we are going to head to round number 4 in France.